August 7th, 2007. Would you please all stand and join me in the salute, pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In case anybody is new or out there in TV land, I'd like to introduce to you Supervisor Steve Walensky. Somebody has pinched his name as a souvenir, so just in case you're wondering who this gentleman is,
I was actually hoping to travel incognito today, but Bill's just outed me.
Yeah, no, you can't get away with that. I have a few announcements. A closed session was held pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. Public employee, county administrative officer, with the following action taken. The chair was authorized to contact several candidates regarding the position of interim county administrative officer. The board authorized the human resources director to initiate the retention of a firm to recruit for the position of county administrative officer. A closed session was held, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9b1, resulting in no action. A closed session was held, conference with real property negotiator, various APNs as follows, several APNs. An agency negotiator, county administrative officer. Negotiating parties were Ryan Voorhees and Greg Opinski. Under negotiation, instruction to negotiator regarding potential purchase price financing options, resulting in no action taken. Another announcement I'd like to make is on next week's agenda, the agenda for 7/14, there's an item on the agenda that was continued from last 2 weeks ago. This item will be the Wallace Lake Estates issue, and the agenda as printed shows it at 1:30 p.m. This will actually be changed to the agenda at 9:30 a.m. and it will be noticed that way, and the folks will be contacted who spoke to this last time. So next week, on the 14th of August, the Wallace Lake Estates agenda item will be on the agenda for 9:30 a.m. Okay. We'll move on to the, no, we won't either. Is that right? Yeah, we can move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. Any board members wish to do so? Any staff member wish to remove an item? Any member of the public wish to remove an item? I will entertain a motion.
I move the adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes on a 302. 302. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to public comment. 5 minutes per person, 15 minutes per topic. Any member of the public wish to address the board on any topic not on today's agenda?
Good morning. My name is Frank Ginger, and I'm here because of Wilseyville. The one question I'd like to ask is, how can the county code enforcement go after people, individuals that have houses that are dirty, when the county's got 4 acres up there in Wilseyville that they illegally dumped for almost 60 years? Isn't that being a little bit hypocritical? Shouldn't we clean up our mess first, then go after the people? I just wanted to know. I think it's wrong that you guys signed the paper but have code enforcement go after people with homes, but yet the county here has got a 4-acre mess up there in Wilseyville they need to clean up.
Well, you know what, Frank? You're in luck today. You came to the right place for an answer.
Okay, I'm ready.
And I'm going to dodge the bullet and let Steve answer you.
Oh, I figured that.
Thanks. That's exactly why I wanted the name tag. We have been working on both issues. I believe you're referring on the county responsibility to the Mitchell Mill site, which, as you've probably heard, is we've managed to get funding to clean that up. and you're right, for a long time that sat, and it was much in need of cleanup for both visual and environmental issues. You don't dump trash, garbage, toxics, burn it, bury it, and call that good on a watershed. So we have every reason to clean that up, and we're doing that as expeditiously as possible. Thanks to our environmental health department, which got on it the minute it was brought forward. The second set of issues is, and I'm not sure of the specifics on the case that you brought forward today, but we have a number of places up in the Wilseyville-West Point Railroad area that have been subject to code compliance complaints. Both neighbors and department have gone into code compliance process. Some of that is for issues of safety. We have some homes that have such bad electrical and plumbing that they become a hazard for the people living there. And in District 2, what we've tried to do is get contractors and others, when those things are found, to repair those. And we've managed to accomplish that in a number of cases, and we have not always been successful, but in most cases, with good neighborhood participation, we've been able to bring things back into compliance. And I believe the case you're talking about is such an effort is underway.
Well, there's been a lot of people sick because of that dump, I'm finding out. I don't think that was, I mean, let's face it, if I would have done that, there would have been heck to pay. But to have our own leadership have a legal dump for that many years, because like she says, she's got the shoebox with all the documentation.
We've seen the shoebox. It took us a little bit of time to assure that the people that own the property were not in any jeopardy legally, and we're working on it. We're cleaning it up. So that's the answer to your question.
So you guys aren't responsible for this?
Of course we are. We're cleaning it up.
Oh,
as we speak.
Okay. I just wanted to know, so that's why I come up
Right.
to see your smiling faces once again.
Okay,
Well,
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board on a topic not on today's agenda?
Good morning, Karen Barney, County Clerk Recorder, and I'm here to inform you that we have our new elections coordinator on board this week, and I'd like to introduce Christine Fouts. Chris joins us at a time, at what I consider to be the most challenging time for election officials in probably the history of voting. And I am very pleased to have Chris on board.
Welcome, Chris. What were you thinking about? Challenging is a good choice of words.
That's a good choice of words.
Thank you.
I look forward to working with you and being back at the county.
Thank you.
Well, we're rooting for your good success. We seem to have continuous elections here, and be great to keep our good record up.
See you in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on an item not on today's agenda?
Good morning. My name's Ed Anderson. I'm a resident of Burson. Supposed to sign in, right?
Yes, please.
Over the years, we haven't agreed on every issue, but I just wanted to come up today and tell you I will be supporting the new jail on the November ballot. And I was thinking the other day, if I get arrested, I need some better accommodations.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for your continued participation and your support. It's appreciated.
You're welcome.
Is there any other member of the public that would like to address the board on an issue not on today's agenda? Okay, we'll move along to item number 14, discussion, possible action regarding a minute order approving the 6th contract amendment with Parsons for the preparation of environmental documents for the Tuscany Hills project in the amount not to exceed $18,570. This will be the Community Development Agency.
Mr.
Chairman, members of the board, this is the last piece of cleanup on this contract. It actually should have been done earlier. It got away from us. The work is completed. We're expecting the bills at any day, so we would ask your indulgence in actually approving this expenditure. This is funded by the developer under a contract with the county, so there's no direct county dollars involved. And this should be the last. The EIR obviously has been certified, and we're done with this project until we start the next phase of actually implementing it. So we would ask your approval of this matter, and that's all there is to it.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 3-0-2. Moving along to item number 15, discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of an urgency ordinance revising Chapter 13.12 of the Calaveras County Code, Sewage Disposal, Environmental Management Agency.
Good morning. Brian Moss, Administrator, Environmental Management Agency. Before the board today is an urgency ordinance that will transfer authority from the building official to the agency administrator for the on-site sewage program in unincorporated areas of Calaveras County. Staff is recommending that this ordinance be adopted as an urgency ordinance due to the fact that the board passed a resolution several weeks ago transferring the program to environmental management. This ordinance makes that one step closer to fruition, if you will, and it allows the administrator actually to carry out the provisions that of the program. The other significant changes to this ordinance, I should say most of them are fairly minor, but significant changes to this ordinance are that in the past, Title 13.12 stated that the building official would go ahead and grant variances upon Board of Supervisors approval. What we've done, or I've done with this code, is I'm proposing to actually give the department head the authority to grant variances for on-site sewage disposal design. If those variances are denied, it is appealable to the Board of Supervisors. So with that said, in the past, this would have been a study session. This is urgency. We want to get this straightened out as soon as possible. Any questions?
Steve, go ahead.
I've got a couple of questions. On the question of appeal, you say that if it's denied, it can be appealed, but I can imagine there might be moments where neighbors close by that might have some concerns about somebody else's septic close to their well, for instance, might have reason to, or concerns that could lead to appeals. Is this a two-way street? If somebody doesn't like an approval, can they appeal it to the board?
I would say as much as the applicant can appeal before the board, certainly the neighbor should have that ability as well.
Can we alter the language to reflect that? Because right now it just says can appeal a denial.
Mr. Chair, actually, I have to apologize to Brian Moss and to the board. I approved this agenda item for today. I think I forgot or overlooked the fact that we only have 3 supervisors here, and I don't think there's enough board members to pass an urgency ordinance. It takes 4. It takes 4/5 vote.
Oh, it
does. Maybe that if it comes back next week, we could amend it accordingly.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just now noticed that.
All right. I guess since it's on the agenda, can we ask our questions
Absolutely.
now? Anyhow?
Please.
I had read that, as you just mentioned, that up to this point, the chief building official had the authority pending board approval. I don't recall very many or really any of these over the last couple of years. How many engineered septics that require variance have we approved or have happened in Calaveras County?
Well, I think that we have quite a few. I don't know the exact number to that. What had happened is...
Are we in the tens, hundreds, thousands?
It could be the latter. It could be the hundreds and thousands. Yes, especially as it comes to the new systems that replace what we call the ISF, or intermittent sand filter systems. So that is a possibility, certainly. And those were actually implemented through policy of the department at the time, but were not actually in the code. So with that said, we're finding that it is necessary to be able to grant those variances, if indeed it's a variance, until we can get those issues addressed in the code. There are actually a couple of codes that regulate on-site sewage. One is the code that's before you today, which is actually the title in the chapter. The other one is actually two resolutions that were adopted by the Board of Supervisors in the early 90s that stipulate the regulations, if you will, telling us how we are to implement this document here. In addition to that were the policies. Those policies are not being implemented today. However, we will incorporate some of those policies into the regulations, if you will, and return that to the board so that these things don't have to be administrative variances. I would tell you that, as an example, one of the issues we're very concerned about are the repairs of septic systems today versus the initial systems. I think a lot of the policies that were stated in the past addressed those issues. We have nowhere to go. We have a failing septic system. We want to repair it. And therefore, the county looked at alternative ways of addressing that issue. Today, we're seeing several applications, at least in my very short tenure with this program, of initial systems requesting variances. I will also state that a couple of weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors granted a variance for a repair of a system in District 3. So I would just tell the board and inform the board we're very concerned about making sure we get those repairs taken care of as soon as possible, and then, of course, addressing the initial systems as well.
All right. Well, given the idea that we might have had 1,000 that were supposed to be done one way and never came through this, I'm delighted to see somebody paying attention to it and trying to get us square with our own rules.
The board gave direction for the department to grant the variance. We were getting variances and we're saying, we're not septic experts.
Okay.
Department head, do you recommend the variance? And it was always a yes. They had done their due diligence and we were just rubber stamping. And so maybe we didn't do it correctly by changing the code, but we did give authority to the department to grant the variances for septic. I mean, the only one I can remember was one being less than 100 feet from the creek on Moran Road. And that's the only one I can remember coming to us. My question, though, Brian, I mean, I just needed to tell Steve that, I mean, he's right. I think we need to make it official that we give authority to the department. But we had, but probably not according to Hoyle. Experimental systems. Where is that? Where are those going to lie? Whether it's a repair or whether it's a new one?
Priority is going to be given to the repairs, essentially because if we have a standard and or a previously engineered system that's in failure, we have to find some way of repairing that system so that those people obviously can continue to reside on their property. That only makes sense to us. I would say experimental systems would be looked at with greater scrutiny for initial systems. As an example, we have an application in right now for putting a septic sewage disposal, not the tank, not the treatment system, but the actual disposal of the liquid waste in a 45% plus slope. That's a concern for us. Number one, it doesn't meet our regulations, which maxes out at 40%, okay? But it is a concern for us for daylighting of effluent as one looks. I don't want to get too far into the technical end of it, but the bottom line is we're concerned that the leach field would actually function and not have any surfacing effluent as a result
That
of
sort of
pitches.
goes to
Well,
stormwater management.
yeah, exactly.
Brian, with AB 885, is there going to be any changes that we need to look at?
We should expect to see significant changes with the adoption of the AB 885 regulations. That's why this document before the board today is really minimal in changes. You'll notice that it's fairly minimal with the exceptions of the variances and the appeals process. I will tell you that I did receive something the other day for an update on Assembly Bill 885 regulations. The state is moving forward with that. Tracy in our on-site sewage department is currently working on a list of email contacts so that we can notify the regulated community of what's happening specifically with that bill so that we will be prepared. But I do expect it to change the program significantly.
So we'll have to revise this again, possibly.
What we will probably do is come back before the board and request that the possibility is signing a memorandum of understanding with the State Water Board to implement the regulations, in which case this document would become null and void.
Okay, anything further?
Thank you.
So, Brian, can you bring this back next week with the modifications?
Absolutely.
You understand what is requested?
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank you.
Are we doing Wallace Lake Estates next week?
Yes. We are.
And this? Do we have a small agenda?
Yes.
Okay, famous last words. Okay, no, you're the chair, hey.
Thank you.
Would the board take action continuing this so we don't have to...
So move.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries on a 302. And,
Just one more.
yes.
Brian, did you get any comments from the septic people and the engineers on this at all?
Actually, I sent it to some consultants and some realtors that contacted me. Anybody that contacted me, I just emailed the draft document with what I would call the blue line document to show the changes. One person I sent to was Mike Del Orto. He requested a copy and he got back with, looks good. I sent it to a realty office in Arnold yesterday and just got a thank you for the quick response. So as of this morning, I haven't heard anything negative. I have run it by some of our engineers and our consultants and told them specifically what we were doing. As a matter of fact, I'm a little surprised not to see anybody here this morning, but I have told them specifically what we're doing with this document.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to 9:30. Board matters, review of correspondence, reports and various matters of concern. Steve?
I have the Mental Health Advisory Board meeting today at 4 p.m. in the library, and that's the only board-appointed meeting that I have this week.
Okay, Maria?
I have a COG meeting from 2 o'clock tomorrow with HR. And on Friday, Mountain County's Region's having a meeting in Sacramento now. Are one of you going? Aren't you on the Mountain Counties? Well, I went for somebody.
For CSAC, you mean?
No, I went to a meeting at Ironstone for one of you, for Mountain Counties Region, blah, blah.
I think that might be Russ.
Oh, maybe it was, thank you. That's all for county, board appointed.
I have on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Mountain Valley Emergency Medical Services Board meeting. That'll be at Saddle Creek. And don't we have COG Wednesday night? I thought we did.
No, we have no COG this Wednesday night, but Carol, if you could confirm, I have no COG on my...
There's none this month?
Yeah, I have no COG on there, but...
Okay. That's all I
If you
have.
could just double check. Yeah,
please.
thank you.
Okay, any member of the staff have anything to report? Jim?
I've started to get questions about the mandatory ethics training that we promised we'd do in the fall, and I think I'm going to revise that. The training is widely available on various sites on the internet, and I think what I'm going to do, subject to supervisor input, would be to have some kind of a last chance training program, maybe late in December, for the procrastinators. In the meantime, we'll put out information to interested people that they can get the training, as I say, in a variety of different ways at their own convenience on the internet. So.
The nice thing about when you did it in your staff, it really answered a lot of specific kinds of questions. That ethics training that the state mandate was ludicrous, and I felt that your staff really responded to issues of concerns to local agencies and elected officials.
Thank you. Well, but in any case, I think we'll do it in December instead of in the fall.
Very well, thank you. Francine? Carol? Okay, this meeting will be standing adjournment till 10 o'clock, at which time we'll have a study session regarding stormwater management presentation by Public Works. Thank you. Francine, can you hit the off button, please?
We want to do a closed session between now and then.
Order. This is our 10 o'clock study session, which will address the stormwater management. This presentation by Public Works.
Good morning. Rob Houghton, Public Works, and with me today is Jim Heminger. What we wanted to do today is really bring the board up to date on our progress in meeting a regulatory mandate that was put in front of us a little more than 7 months ago, back in December. And before I begin with this, I put a copy of the stormwater management plan on the podium up there for you. We've got extra copies here if people need a paper copy of it. We've also posted it on the website and sent out notification to at least the stakeholders that we're aware of at this point in time. Do want to acknowledge that Jim really brought on solely for the purpose of pushing this program ahead. He was primary author of the stormwater management plan and working with the water board to make sure that we were going to be in compliance with their issues. And I also wanted to note that Doug Pelzoni and GIS have worked with us to put the graphics together on this, so I'll give you a little bit of credit for some nice work done. So our purpose here today, like I suggested, was really to review where we're at with regulatory compliance in the stormwater management program. And with that, introduce our draft stormwater management plan. Go through some of it in some detail, kind of highlight.
I just have a quick,
yes.
This is the final draft,
This is,
but we'll have a chance to comment again. I mean, or is this final, I'm not real clear what final draft
I
meant.
can talk about that a little bit more as we
Okay.
work through the
Thank you.
process. One of the things I do want to note is that this is a regulatory compliance document. We have submitted a draft to the water board to make sure that it covers their issues. We had a regulatory deadline of June 23rd for getting this document in. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, and then also outline our schedule for the follow-up steps for making sure that we meet the objectives of the plan itself. At this point in time, for this study session, we're not requesting any board action, pretty much apprising the board of where we're at with things and letting you know whether we're meeting your objectives or not. So going back to a question you kind of already asked, this was triggered by a mandate from Regional Water Quality Control Board. Basically brought us into what they refer to as their Phase 2 compliance program for their nationwide pollution discharge elimination system. Pretty much subjects us to a general permit with a series of specific requirements. By June 23rd, they notified us that by June 23rd we were obligated to submit a notice of intent to comply with that general permit. We've completed that, and at the same time we were under an obligation to develop and implement the stormwater management plan. And one of the other conditions of that permit was to reduce the discharge of pollutants to the maximum extent practical. That's a phrase that's built into that permit. We'll talk about more and more as we go through the document, but it really is the performance standard that's built into that permit requirement. And then a continuing obligation of this permit is to report annually on our progress not only to implement the plan as it was adopted, but also our progress on our ability to reduce discharges. We had a study session back in February. I briefed the board on what the scope of this program was, and board direction from that study session was to move ahead with preparation of this document. We've done that work. Like I said, we've submitted a draft to the Water Board by the June 23rd deadline. We've met our regulatory obligation, and also submitted our notice of intent to comply with the terms of the general permit. So we have basic regulatory compliance at this point with the general permit. And also at that study session, we talked about the significance of a grading ordinance that would be part of this stormwater management plan, and also dovetailed nicely into prior board direction and interest in developing a local grading ordinance to deal with some local issues that we've been having over the last several years. So by introduction, stormwater management plan, like I said, you've got a copy sitting in front of you. We've made copies available on the website and have notified stakeholders of its availability. I want to talk a little bit about what that plan is. In a general sense, before we get into the details, it is, in essence, a work plan of programs and projects, operational changes that we have an obligation to implement over the next 5 years. This is really a starting point in stormwater management. It's not an end point. It really is a regulatory compliance document to demonstrate how we are going to implement a series of measures to comply with the terms of that permit. One of the things to recognize is that, like I said, this is a starting point. We have annual reporting obligation under the permit, and it really is an iterative process. We've got something on paper now that meets the minimum requirements, the regulatory objectives, and we'll be going back to that permit and to this plan on a regular basis to identify whether it's successful or whether additional measures need to be added or beefed up. I think it's also important to understand what the management plan isn't. There's a perception, and certainly we've had a number of water issues in this county over the last couple of years, both in terms of too much water at the wrong place, but also concerns about water quality. And so there's a great deal of interest in changing certain things in the county, in particular development practices, but also oversight on construction projects. And there are many in the community that are interested in developing a more comprehensive plan of what should happen with stormwater management that goes beyond the scope of this management plan itself. And what I wanted to do is to emphasize that if this is a regulatory compliance document, it really is not a document that's intended to be an exercise in local self-determination. It really is not a corollary to the general plan. General plan is something that we do that basically memorializes our vision for our community. This plan is not intended to serve that purpose for stormwater management. It is intended to meet the terms of that general permit. It serves as a background document to general plan updates, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I felt that it was important to constrain the scope of this because these are commitments that we're making to a state agency. And I did not want to extend the scope of this without further public input and without further board direction. As we go through the process and as we get community input and board direction, we can certainly expand the scope of this, but I've been very conservative in scoping this out simply to make the state agencies happy. So with that, like I said, 5-year work plan that meets the objectives of the general permit. It identifies implementation measures or best management practices that meets those objectives. It provides for a financial and administrative responsibility for meeting those objectives, identifies funding mechanisms, and identifies the responsible parties within county government to meet those objectives. In many instances, the responsible entity is Public Works, but in other instances, it's Environmental Health, Community Development, County Administrative Office, and this document kind of lays out those responsibilities and identifies how those will be funded. And then it also identifies the need for annual progress reports, which is really that iterative process that we use to update the management plan. The real meat and potatoes of this document are what are referred to as minimum control measures. There's a series of 6 minimum control measures that, in general plan parlance, is really implementation measures. The meat and potatoes portion of the document sits in Appendix C and consists of a series of 6 tables that identify or that are categorized by those minimum control measures, and then lists each of the best management practices that we anticipate undertaking. One grouping of those is a public education and outreach program. Under that, it really is pretty much self-explanatory, identifying a series of measures by which we will garner public support, cooperation, and understanding of the program. And what we've done is outlined a series of 10 different measures that we'll use to do outreach to the public. It includes things such as having a booth at the county fair, working with CCWD in their public school education outreach program, preparation of brochures and flyers that will be available at public facilities, libraries, and general information locations. And it'll also be tied into some of our existing programs, things like parking loads going into transfer stations and solid waste facilities, also working on no litter programs along roadsides. Second minimum control measure is the public participation and involvement program that consists of 7 different best management practices. And it really is intended to not simply inform the public of what the program is, but to solicit their participation and their involvement. And it includes things that would encourage community-based roadside cleanups. It includes things that would basically create a hotline for public to report perceived discharges that we could use as a mechanism for following up on problems, and also creating a variety of different forms of involvement for the public and community organizations to have input into the program and into the annual updates. The third minimum control measure is a series of best management practices that associated with illicit discharge detection and elimination. Within this, many of these programs already exist within the county and are already being conducted by our environmental health department. A lot of it has to do with septic tanks, illegal discharges associated from failing septic tanks. We talk about a work element in here that goes to many of the issues that Brian was talking about at an earlier item today that will dovetail with the implementation of the AB 885 regulations. This work plan simply recognizes that activity going forward, and it will be incorporated into the work plan. We'll monitor that to demonstrate compliance with the general permit. It also includes food facility inspections and inspections of automotive facilities, gas stations, oil change locations to make sure that they're handling their wastes appropriately, but also washdown waters is a very significant aspect of this program. Historic practice, I think we've all seen gas stations hosing down the fueling areas to get them clean, and that water runs off into roadside drainages. That practice will no longer be acceptable. We'll be developing local ordinances and regulations to control that activity to make sure that there's no discharge of pollutants associated with those fueling operations.
What about car wash?
Car washes are a regulated activity depending upon the scale of them. We don't regulate the high school volunteer fundraisers, but certainly the commercial enterprises is a regulated activity, and they will be obligated to control their discharges and prevent any discharge to surface water.
So where does it go?
Many of them, and I'll speak for Public Works in the way that we manage. We've got a wash rack at our facility, and we have what is essentially a water recycling operation there that removes most of the impurities, and we reuse that water, and then the low down water from back flushing that filtering mechanism is discharged to the sanitary system, and we've got a permit the sanitary system to allow that. So this is certainly a very significant part of the program and relies very much on other departments within Public Works. We work with environmental management to make sure that they understand the significance of these programs, their role in them, and they've had nothing but support for this program, and it dovetails fairly well with their existing programs. Fourth area, and probably the most significant one in terms of public interest, but also the most significant one in terms of why the Water Board pushed this program ahead of schedule, was construction sites for water controls. I guess it won't be a newsflash for me to tell you that we've had an awful lot of construction activity in the last couple of years that has resulted in the discharge of sediment to adjoining waterways. Many of those activities, I should say an isolated number of those project sites have come under scrutiny by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, have been cited for their failure to implement appropriate best management practices. And because of those failures, the state has felt compelled to create a mechanism, or to put this mechanism in place here, where the authority to enforce those regulations now becomes a local responsibility. That responsibility now will sit within Public Works to enforce those existing regulations. At this point in time, we are not looking at making dramatic changes to the types of best management practices that contractors should have been following over the last 3 or 4 years. What will change is just the nature of the enforcement. There'll be local oversight and enforcement of those activities. I'll be talking more about how we anticipate accomplishing that. One of the key elements of this, of course, will be the creation of a local grading ordinance. We've been working on that. Jim has been working on that, and we'll be talking more about what that's going to look like, and you'll see that. But that really is the nuts and bolts of this minimum control measure for construction site control. Our local grading ordinance will also address certain drainage and erosion control issues. The fifth minimum control measure is actually another very significant element to the extent it affects new development within Calaveras County. Important to note that many of the best management practices that are outlined in this minimum control measure will apply to community areas within Calaveras County. We will be looking at developing a number of new design standards for development, and it will affect high-density residential development. It will affect commercial developments greater than 100,000 square feet. We'll be requiring such things as controls on parking lots to minimize the discharge of pollutants associated with standing vehicles. It'll also create design standards for gas stations and restaurants to minimize discharging fluids from their operations, like we suggested earlier. And this is actually what I see as the community having a huge interest in. And I think there's an expectation that this document was going to establish these new standards, and that's not the case. What we're establishing in this document is a need to look at those standards, and we're suggesting that that's much more of a local self-determination process that will be incorporated into the general plan update. And so many of these design standards aren't established here by this plan, but only that work element identified as being a critical part, and it's something that will happen as we do the general plan update. And so that's where I hope to solicit a great deal of public input on the scope and nature of those design standards and what it is that we want to see for new development in this county. And then the sixth minimum control measure is probably the one that most directly and significantly affects public works facilities. This creates an obligation upon us to essentially serve as a model to the community on how to manage stormwater effectively and eliminate any non-stormwater discharges from our facilities. Establishes a host of best management practices for good housekeeping and preventative measures to minimize illicit discharges from our facilities. So that, in a nutshell, gives you a sweeping overview of what's in the stormwater management plan. I avoided getting into great detail at this point, simply because it really is, at this point, a work plan that identifies work elements that we're committing to undertake over the next 5 years. It is our commitment to not only the board, but our commitment to a state agency of what we can accomplish and what we perceive as being necessary to meet the regulatory requirements of the general permit. I've got a number of slides here that outline many of the measures that I talked about under public education and outreach, or actually each of the minimum control measures. I wasn't going to go over them in detail and wanted to move ahead to what I see as the next steps in the process. To the extent that we've got public interest, I can come back to those slides and we can talk about that in detail, but at this point what I'd like to do is talk about process and where we're at. February study session, I made a commitment that we would have a local grading ordinance in place by the next rain season. We're well on our way to accomplishing that. We've got a draft grading ordinance we shared with the water board that they seem reasonably comfortable with, and we will have that available for public circulation on August 14th, next Tuesday. It'll be posted and we'll initiate circulation of that draft grading ordinance. What I wanted to do today was just outline significant changes with that local grading ordinance. First of all, for us, a significant delegation of authority and responsibility to public works for all grading and construction stormwater runoff control within the county. So permitting that activity and having regulatory oversight of that activity. We've never had a local grading ordinance. We've historically relied upon the California Building Code, which has an appendix chapter 33 that outlines grading standards. In many instances that doesn't meet our needs, but also doesn't clearly identify local administration of that code. I think we've suffered from that in the past, and so this grading ordinance at a minimum will clarify responsibility and authority and create a local ordinance of standards. One of the things we're also doing with the grading ordinance is establishing a design manual that has basically, I don't call it quite a procedures manual, but it lets contractors and engineers in the community understand what our expectations are of how to meet the standards. So rather than vague ordinance language, it will be far more specific as to what is expected and what's required in order to get a permit. And in an attempt to facilitate that process, and help them through our system. One of the other aspects of the grading ordinance that I think is important to us is to have a tiered permitting structure, and to explain how contrast it to the existing system, which is essentially a one-size-fits-all. And basically we currently require the same thing from a small grading project as we do for a 300-unit subdivision. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense. Very different impacts to the environment. It should have a very different set of standards. And so we are creating a tiered permitting program that essentially has a ministerial permit for very small grading jobs that simply advises the applicant of what the constraints are. And then conversely, we'll have other permit levels or tiers that are much more onerous and exercise a great deal of control over that activity. Related to that tiered permitting structure is a tiered fee schedule. We will continue to have a flat fee for simple grading projects for the non-engineered ones, and then we'll be recommending a fee schedule that essentially is based on cost recovery for all the large grading projects, consistent with the way we handle subdivision projects currently. And then probably the most significant aspect in terms of dealing with the problems that we've had over the last couple of years is just having a very clear, well-articulated, progressive enforcement policy that makes it quite evident to all parties involved how we deal with problems with grading, erosion control, and pollution problems associated with construction sites. It'll create a mechanism where the applicant knows that they're in violation of the standards up front, written notifications that identify what corrective actions are necessary, and also what the consequences of failing to implement those corrective actions. Next steps in the process. We basically have an obligation to give the stormwater management plan to the water board at the earliest possible date. We would like to submit this document to the board as basically our operating plan in its current form. Once it's accepted by the water board, it will be up for a 60-day public comment period, and certainly it's that process there that will allow future changes. Oops.
So, Rob, it has to be approved by them before we put it out again for public comment within the county?
And actually, Jim might be able to explain this a little bit better. We have an obligation to get this thing to the water board basically as soon as possible after June 23rd in this version. In order to comply with general permit requirements, there's an obligation to post it for 60 days for public comment period. And in order for us to be in compliance, there's no opportunity for us to have a public comment period before we submit it to the board. And so we're going to dovetail any public comment period with this.
So we're just going to run it in parallel with theirs?
Yes.
So,
Do I have that right, Jim?
Okay.
excuse me, Rob, but did you say this draft has been submitted to the Regional Water Quality Board to see if they have any issues with it?
We submitted an administrative draft or informal draft to a staff person at the water board just to see that it met his interest and his understanding of general permit requirements.
So you're going to wait until you hear from that individual?
We've heard back from him. We've gotten comments. We've incorporated his comments.
Okay.
And this is the draft that we have sitting in front of us today. And so I'm comfortable that this draft meets our regulatory obligations. And it's based on that I'm suggesting that we submit this document to the water board to meet our general permit obligations.
Okay, thank you.
And we certainly have an opportunity to modify the document over this next 60 days as we receive comments. We'll also have an opportunity to modify the document over the next 5 years as we do our annual reports and solicit community input during that process. As I suggested, on the 14th, we will have draft local grading ordinance available. That is truly draft, and we are soliciting community input on that. It will also come with the design method that I talked about. We'll have a 30-day public comment period. What I'd like to do is then close out that public comment period with a study session on the 11th, where we can basically receive any final input from the community, and then also give the board's direction on that local grading ordinance. Somehow I missed placing it here. I also have a study session scheduled for the 25th, where I hope to basically consolidate the input that we receive on the 11th, bring it back to the board as a final draft on the 25th, and then get direction from the board at that point in time, and then hopefully introduce a local grading ordinance for adoption early in October. So this is kind of cramming a lot of very intensive work into the next 2 months, but it's what we need to do in order to have a grading ordinance in place before the next rainy season. And at the same time, also create an opportunity for community input. I guess with any program like this, I felt it was necessary to at least touch bases on resource and finance issues related to the program. We have budgeted resources in our preliminary budget for 0708, including a new public works inspector to handle grading inspections, and also reclassification of the staff person to a permit tech to accommodate just handling the grading permits to the public works counter.
So where does that fund come from? Where is that? Is that going to be proposed general fund money or from the fees?
It's fees. The fee schedule that we'll be proposing with the local grading ordinance is going to be cost recovery, and it will fund the activities necessary to implement this program. And basically, the developers paying for developer costs.
And the permit technician, same?
Exactly. And then, based on the input we get during these series of study sessions, there may be a need to update that information in the final budget. At this point in time, I don't anticipate any changes in the final budget, but I threw it up there.
So, but Rob, if we approve the final budget before the fees schedule comes to the board?
We would have to come back and modify our budget.
Okay. But are you proposing the fee schedule to the board prior to final budget, which could happen at any day?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. I will have a draft fee schedule on the 14th, but it won't be ready for board adoption until early October.
Okay. So I just need the board to be cognizant of the fact that this could be general fund money, or that if we don't approve the fee for whatever reason, or we modify the fee, and those positions are approved, or the reclassification, that's general fund dollars. There is no other
Correct.
pocket. Okay. Thank you.
So with that, I just wanted to close up and talking about targets. We are on target to complete the board objectives within the established schedule. Jim has been devoted to this activity. Actually has taken on a number of different activities in addition to this with Public Works while he's been here to help staff on a number of different issues. But I'm feeling very comfortable about where we are with this, and just very thankful that Jim was here and able to help us with this stuff. With that, we're open to input and becoming started.
Will you back up a couple slides to your schedule, the timing? Yes, that. Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board or questions at this time?
Maybe after the public.
Okay, the answer is no.
I have some.
Does the public have any comments or questions? John?
Good morning, John Buckley representing CSERC, and I wanted to start this morning by doing something I don't always have a chance to do, which is to praise the county for a project.
I need a drink.
Me too. But it's certainly been a while since our center has gotten a document from any county or agency that we work with that was as readable, as clear, and as well done as this particular project document. So I want to start off by sharing that this stormwater management plan is very, very well done from our center's perspective. I want to just touch on a few things, because if I don't get them in now, then when you guys later come to these discussions of the grading ordinance or other things, you won't perhaps have the background of what I think is very important perspective to at least consider, not to necessarily be in agreement with, a conservation perspective on it, but at least be aware of what the issue is. The first is that on page, and I'm not asking you to go through all of these page by page with me, but on page 25 of the document, it lists that under surface water, hydrology, and water quality, that there are several specific goals within the county's existing general plan that are particularly relevant, and two of those are the ones that I'm focusing on. One is to protect streams, rivers, and lakes from excessive sedimentation due to development and grading, and the other is protect and preserve riparian habitat upon streams and rivers in the county. And the reason I focus on those is over the years when our centers come in here and we've bitched and complained and whined about major projects that have mass grading, it's in part because either our staff biologists and I, or just myself, have been out at times during heavy storm events, and I can think of two areas in Copperopolis alone, it's too bad Russ isn't here, where during heavy rains, even where they have the hay bales and they have that orange plastic fencing that you guys have seen in the sites, during heavy rains, the muddy water is just pouring off the sites. It's clearly going into ephemeral streams or drainages and on down into receiving bodies of water. When mass grading takes place, no matter what the intent the county may have had in the past, there are problems. And I underscore that even with the current existing plan, you have a goal to not to let that happen. And over on page 37 of the document, it lists that the top priority has been given to implementation of measures necessary to control soil erosion and sediment discharges from construction sites in high-growth areas of the county. And high priority has also been given to the implementation of requisite land use guidelines and design standards for new development and redevelopment projects. And one question I'm just asking you to put into your minds as you begin this process of complying with something that's a mandate now from the state. It's not that you're being asked to do something voluntarily. You're being required to do this. Is, do you want to allow mass grading on project sites in the foothill here in Calaveras County, or do you want to, and as I'll talk about in attachment 4, come forward with clear standards that are in compliance with what the state is making you do, but also there's benefits for so many of the scenic values, wildlife values, and a lot of other values. On page 43 of the document, it talks about the fact that just what was in the PowerPoint presentation, that there's going to be a grading and drainage ordinance that will require implementation of best management practices. And obviously, our center is extremely concerned of how much teeth are put into those requirements. And so, that is something that I believe is essential. I'm going to talk about that as I close. On page 44 of the document, it talks about a number of things that are going to go into the grading ordinance, and it mentioned again a tiered system. I strongly support what was put forward as a suggestion for a tiered system. In Tuolumne County, again, the amount of, it's a discretionary permit that is a ministerial permit for something that's small up to a certain amount of cubic yards that's going to be moved. And so when someone comes in, it's almost no cost at all. They're simply providing the information for a minimum amount of a small project, but for the larger project, there has to be far more involvement. One of the key things I bring to you on this, and you guys didn't cover it, but I know it was an essential part of this, is on page 45 of the document. It says, a list of the various measures that will be taken by Calaveras County to conform to the attachment 4 requirements is shown in Table 5 in Appendix C. The county is only required to implement these measures within the designated MS4 stormwater discharge permit areas, and then they're listed. But why in the world would the county only require good management practices within the areas that you're absolutely forced to do it, and yet across an invisible boundary, 50 feet away or 100 yards away or a quarter mile away, allow a developer to do something that is far different? So I read you the next part, which says, attachment 4 requirements and associated implementing measures may be extended beyond these areas at the discretion of the county as may be needed to protect water quality or to provide for consistent regulation within neighboring areas of development. And again, at this point, all I'm asking you, I understand you're not taking action today, is think about now and with staff of providing uniform quality standards. Doesn't mean that you may not have some extra special requirements in a highly sensitive area, which are some that are identified in the document, but don't just apply good standards to where you're absolutely forced to in what they refer to as these designated SM4 storm charge areas. The other things that I emphasize is on page 50 of the document, it says the Central Valley Regional Water Board has indicated they consider inadequately controlled pollutant discharges from construction activity to be the most significant stormwater quality concern in Calaveras County. And obviously, this is something that our center has strong concern about. On page 51 of the document, under enforcement, it says, to the greatest extent possible, Calaveras County will encourage voluntary efforts to achieve compliance with new and existing local stormwater control requirements. And, that only makes sense. I mean, to try and help people do the right thing by encouraging is very, very positive. But if you don't provide teeth, if you don't provide some clear consequence, there will be those who either are not motivated or actually are choosing not to comply. So the last things that I would close with has to do with in Table 3, which it's hard to find because of the numbering stuff, but in Table 3, it lists that controlling surface discharges from failing on-site wastewater treatment systems, septic systems, has an implementation date goal of 2010. In Tuolumne County, similar to when I talked to the staff beforehand, you guys don't have people who are out there on a regular basis checking 25-year-old septic systems or whatever. People don't go and check unless there's some violation or some problem that arises, or that there's the real estate requirement when someone sells their property, they have to have a check, and all of a sudden they find that there's a problem. And in Tuolumne County, no one really went and looked randomly, are there septic systems that are failing, or had requirements for the public to be maintaining their septic systems. And as Jim can answer about AB 885 maybe changing that in the future. But the reason I bring this up is Calaveras County has less stringent, is the best way to say it, septic system guidelines than Tuolumne County or other counties. It has the least amount of requirement for soil of any of the counties across in the foothills here. Only 1 foot of soil with supplemental systems. And in Tuolumne County, when they finally got a grant to do water testing of 7 streams, they found 6 of the streams had fecal coliform levels in them that exceed the EPA standards for recreational body contact. They never knew it. They simply didn't have, the same as Calaveras County, they don't have people going out and testing the water quality, but once they got a grant to do it, they found that septic systems are contaminating streams in the county. And it is something that will be a problem even more in the future as older septic systems fail. So in closing, the key points that I would respond to is one, that our center is very, very supportive of adopting a firm, fair, and feasible grading ordinance with the schedule that's put forward. We think it's great that instead of inching forward, the county is willing to step forward. We're emphasizing also a point that Marita brought up about the payment, who's going to pay for monitoring and for enforcement. And we urge that if there is a cost that the county is going to have to bear, that it's essential that the cost of the monitoring and enforcement go not just to the developers for that monitoring, but also for those that are creating in residential development or whatever septic systems, for the permits and fees to be commensurate with the cost that will be for consistent monitoring of that. And then the last thing that I would close with is in your attachment 4, there are a number of policies that are being suggested for those specific MS4 areas. And 3 of those are under what's called conserved natural areas. One says concentrate or cluster development on portions of a site while leaving the remaining land in a natural undisturbed condition. The second is limit clearing and grading of native vegetation at a site to the minimum amount needed to build the lots to allow access and provide fire protection. And the third is maximize trees and other vegetation at each site by planting additional vegetation, clustering tree areas, and promoting the use of native and or drought-tolerant plants. I would urge, not today, it's not an action item, but as soon as possible, your board, in response to this water issue and the requirements for the state, adopt as interim guidelines policies that will help protect water quality, and adopt what you already have drafted up as potential interim policies in your attachment 4, which doesn't mean that somebody can't build on steep hillsides or across in areas that have sensitive soils or whatever, but concentrates and clusters developments while leaving the area that's not needed to be disturbed in a natural condition, and limits the clearing and grading of vegetation to the amount that's needed to build the lots, allow access, and provide fire protection, instead of mass grading of broad areas that leaves everything denuded. So thank you again to staff for a very excellent beginning, and obviously the question is will such a very excellent beginning report actually lead to enforcement and some strict guidelines? So thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other member of the public wish to address the board on this issue or have questions?
Joe Kelly. To answer Mr. Buckley's idea about teeth, if he were to contact EcoSlow in San Luis Obispo, I'm sure they can fill him up with all kinds of information of state water's fines that they have implemented. I don't know if any of you folks have been to one of their seminars about stormwater pollution prevention plan, but it's about $10,000, $10 a day and so much, or $10 a gallon and so much a day, plus other systems to be put in. I find this system, this document is not comprehensive. State is just passing a buck to make the counties responsible to do their job on this. Why? They only have 4 people in the state of California that come out and check complaints for enforcement. How do I know that? My property's under state water right now because of a flooding problem that's been there for 30 years. 30 years. Who's been involved? Calaveras County, number 1, FEMA, number 2, and now state water. Where does all this government regulation end to where we get people that come about and go comprehensively to look at a water problem and cure it, rather than just, oh, well, here, we want our monies, we want our monies. That's what I see this is about, money. I would like to see in this document, or something from the state of California, and they can provide it, it's probably changed now because they provide it in their stormwater seminars, what it costs per dwelling for the implementation of all this best management practice products and the solutions that they provide for curing this problem. I'm not against clean water. I want clean water. But I also see a problem. I just picked the document up today and going through it and then listening to Mr. Buckley, and thank you, Mr. Buckley. But I find this enforcement concept. State Water's had this program around for quite a few years. Yet when I contacted the building department, code enforcement, about my water issue, I talked to 3 different people there, and I think I finally talked to the director at that time and was told there's nothing we can do about it. I'm concerned about the issue of the pollution sources, sediment, nutrients, with irrigated ag. I don't necessarily believe that it is 100% cause of fertilizers by agriculture. What I am concerned about is that agriculture can come under a problem with what I similarly have on my property, that in December 31st of 05, I believe it was, more than 30% of my property was underwater, caused by an illegal dam and Lobo Lane, which is a county road with a bridge with an abutment to allow water to go through Nassau Creek to go through it. But the dam is what caused the problem. And as I say, State Water's involved in this. It's been over a year. They do have a plan or a discussion form in place. It has to be approved by somebody before they can do anything. So this goes, what then will the county be able to do? Will it be able to cure these kind of problems? Because my feeling is there's a lot of other dams and properties that are affected the same way. Will county code enforcement be able to come in and take care of that? Will it have the teeth to take care of it? I think not. I think not. So I'm also concerned about the concept of agriculture, in that this goes beyond just the concept, the word agriculture. It goes on down the road, not only with our grading ordinance, but into our general plan and into our zoning. So how comprehensive are we going to be in all the overlapping documents that will have this oversighting it or shadowing it? Will we have a discussion of agriculture and what agriculture is affected? Will we have a discussion of agriculture, what agriculture should be, how it should be? Should it be viable? Should it be, I forgot the one word I want, but viable commercial agriculture, rather than just zoning land as a holding pattern for agriculture, as agriculture, until something else comes up? So that's one of the things. Agriculture needs to be looked at hard so that we can continue to preserve and protect agriculture. If we don't protect it, who knows what we're going to be eating out of China and every other foreign country. And that's what's happening here. We're losing a lot of industries to include, and I will say agriculture is an industry. Oil and grease under the concept of pollution sources. I didn't see anything here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no mention of contamination mitigation of vehicle fleets. And I'm going to use 2, government and school districts. They want garages rather than parked outdoor vehicles, or you have to set up some sort of a filtration system to catch that water and take that oil out. So I suggest that the county looks into that too, because you will be subjected to that. If you aren't, I'll be real surprised, because I've seen other school districts within the state having been subjected to that. And they were also threatened with $100,000 fines. And they also the board members also looked at it like, we're a government agency, they can't mess with us. They found out different. Luckily, they didn't have to pay anything, because people rose up and said, read something, stupid, and that's what they did. Washdown waters. As I stated, this stormwater pollution prevention plan has been around for a long time. Will the county, and in particular Public Works, be held to the same standards? And when I say that, I look at this upper parking lot where I sat there, came in one day for something, and wound up going into Public Works, pulling an engineer out of there and said, come over here and look at this, what's wrong with this? And he and I both attended the same seminar. He just looks at it. I said, well, where's all that water, that dirt, that oil, that grease going? He said, oh, it won't happen again. The next day I came in, the same truck was up there washing the lot down again. So what we have to do is we have to have it comprehensive. Everybody has to be not just encouraged, they have to have training. They have to have training on the installation of BMP. I go out to drive down the freeway, look at Caltrans. They don't even know how to put down wattles. They just stake them on top of the ground or stake on either side instead of through them, but they're supposed to have a little ditch there for them to fit into. The proper way to install. So we need instruction education programs for the installation of these best management practices. Otherwise, they're a failure. I already went over this, but the fees, the cost recovery, with that should be a fiscal analysis of additional cost of housing, not only from the state's perspective, but from the county's perspective. And with that, until I have more time to be able to take a peek at this thing a little deeper, I thank you.
Mr. Kelly, on Table 6, it shows the kinds of things that the county will be doing for our own facilities. So
okay, like I say, I didn't have time. I just received this at about a little bit before 10, and then I was in discussing some other issues with someone else, so I haven't had a...
I mean,
I haven't been able to do like Mr. Buckley has been able to look at it.
The points well taken. The county will also be held to the same standard.
They are in several areas, and I thank you for your vigilance, but you know what? This is a regulatory compliance document, and I think it's a very good start. So I wouldn't want you to think that the county's turning a blind eye to things. This is...
Oh, no, sir, I don't think that. But what I am saying is that the county needs to be more comprehensive about it to make it work properly. Otherwise, you will always have somebody that will try to slide under the wire.
Thank you. I think we're pretty well aware of that, and they're going to try to, as item 8.4 suggests, under enforcement, voluntary efforts are the best way, and I'm sure that education will have a big impact on that. Enforcement, hard enforcement, is something we would like to avoid, but you're right, there has to be a method for that if we meet resistance, and so we have to start somewhere, and this is a real
That's
start.
correct, but then it has to be, we the people have to be assured that it will be looked at and updated as necessary and not just sit there and, you know, I'm sure the county, as it's mandating it, will come down and add additional things, and regardless, but what my biggest concern is the concept of agriculture. I have seen it happen where it can destroy agriculture.
Right, I agree with you, and I think if you've been paying attention to what this board's done for the last few years, you'll see that that is a very high priority for us. Has been. And continues to be.
Yes, you have. I believe you have a agriculture.
This is a right to farm county.
Right to farm. Thank you.
We just spent a great deal of time, effort, and money rewriting the agricultural zoning ordinance to try to protect that. So.
And right to farm only goes as far as that it's here in this county. Who has the override on it? State? State, I believe, has the override.
That's why the regulatory compliance document.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address this issue?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't have anything very well prepared. We've just been given this very, very recently. Thank you, Jim and Rob. 100-page document. We're trying to review it as quick as possible, but we appreciate that we do have actually more time with the state to review it too. That'll be great. So I just had some very brief comments. On page 26, Table 1, designated beneficial uses under New Hogan Reservoir. It does not list that it's an existing beneficial use as domestic water supply and irrigation, and it is, and I'm sure that's just an oversight, but I thought it should be in there since we have thousands of people that do use that, and that's just probably an omission there. And let me see. This is not a criticism or anything. I just noticed on page 32 talking about impaired water bodies, and it listed our lower Calaveras River, and we had problems with diazinon and fertilizers and failing septic systems, and I just thought that was a very interesting summary in the 303 listed impaired water bodies of the Federal Clean Water Act. So I'm really happy to see we have a document that hopefully will be helping us deal with and do oversight on some of the problems down there. And as Mr. Buckley mentioned, the design standards that we see in attachment 4, we're really excited about some sort of implementations or policies that the board could get going, maybe even on an interim basis, as John suggested. We've been trying to suggest to developers and builders in the planning department, and it seems to be a matter of just common sense of smart growth and cluster development and concentration of growth while leaving land and open space areas. This obviously impacts the quality of water runoff, and the planning department doesn't have any policies or teeth to encourage developers to do that. So it would be really nice to have something. And this is something that, if you're going to adopt this, maybe this would be a start for that. And also, as Mr. Buckley related, as far as that, the policies on mass grading, that also affects our water quality. And if we could get some preliminary policies or guidelines into the planning department as soon as possible, and I understand the general plan update will be a place to put these policies in. But, that's going to be a while. It's going to take a while to do that, and we would just like to see that as soon as possible. So I want to reiterate that. And one other concern, under when the draft ordinance for grading is being prepared, and evidently it has been prepared, we would like to, as much notification as possible. We've asked for notification, and we just got this a few days ago, and we really had no time to look at it. The grading ordinance is going to be up next week. September 11th is less than 30 days. We're doing a lot of work, as you know, and covering a lot of things in the county, and we just would really appreciate as much notice as possible on these issues. And also under reviewing the draft ordinance, it mentions input and recommendations from local stakeholders. The stakeholders listed are developers, contractors, and engineers. We would like to request that other stakeholders include watershed planning groups and other planning groups in the county be included in that for now and in the future. That'd be appreciated. But we love this document, thinks it's a great step. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colleen. Any other member of the public that wants to comment on this item?
Well, first of all, I think it's quite well done. I think there are some gaps in there, but I think the comments today of the people who are listening and who have read the document over have certainly added a lot to it. And I think that your attention to this is so important. And I know we've been in the Rancho area, we've been complaining for years about what happens in construction, tearing up hillsides and then not banking them, putting homes in, and some of the septic systems that have been allowed to go in are just close to the drainage pattern that the county has that goes into the major streams. A couple of things that bother me, or not bother me, but I'm concerned about, and that is with all of the subdivisions and all the developments that have been okayed to start work, are they going to be following this? Are you going to be able to enforce this with them? Or is this after the fact? And I think this is really critical because in the Valley Springs Basin there are so many, the whole area now is subdivisions. And I think when they start going on this, they should have to follow these rules and regulations that have been set up in this document. And I don't know whether that is possible or not, but I think because of what is going on with the plans, the changes that are happening down there, I think this is critical. And I think that something needs to be explained to every one of those contractor developers what is now required by the state. And even if it isn't implemented in writing here, the state will force it on them. And it's not you forcing it, you're their friends, but something needs to be done about that, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of the runoff coming in. CCWD needs to be involved in that, because if their sewer treatment plant, their water treatment plant, and the breaking of the pipes that's going on, like in La Contenta, in Gold Strike, there are many homes that are having problems now. And this is a new setup in the system. And the other thing, I know this is a bad one to bring up, but Hogan, of course, has a lot of cattle that come in. This is perfectly normal for them to drink and go at the same time. And so they have all of those factors to consider, and that becomes our drinking water, and that's up to CCWD to keep the water as clean as possible, but sometimes it isn't possible. And also there's at least 11,000 acre-feet of runoff from the side hills. This is during the big rains, 11,000 acre-feet, and that's a lot of water. That is carrying materials that have, say, from up in Arnold, where a lot of the spraying has taken place in the past, or the cutting down of the trees. You have the mining areas. All of that water is coming in. So this is something that there's not much you can do about it. It's over and done with, but it is coming. And every year that we have the heavy rains, this is something that has to be considered. And how you can figure that one out is a magnanimous problem. But I really think that you've got a real good program started, and I think you need congratulations. And I also think everybody's comments in here today are worth noting and putting down, because these are very learned people and people very interested in the county. And it's one of the few times I've ever come to a meeting and haven't heard a lot of negativity. So congratulations.
Thank you, Alice. Anyone else? Okay, Rob, is there anything you wish to respond to, or do you want to bring it?
A couple of things real quick. I did want to provide some clarification. A lot of comments regarding our Appendix F includes what's referred to as Attachment 4 from the general permit. I just wanted to be clear to all the stakeholders, readers of this document, that Attachment 4 is an attachment to the general permit to which we have an obligation to comply. So these aren't our standards yet, but these are standards built into the general permit, and we need to come up with a process to consider adoption of these standards locally.
Okay.
So I just want people to understand what that is at this point in time. These aren't our standards yet, but we'll be looking at that stuff over the foreseeable future. And then secondly, addressing the issue of application of any of the standards we're talking about here to ongoing development, new development, or stuff that's likely to happen this fall. Certainly, any of the construction site stormwater issues is strictly enforceable immediately by local authorities based on us being participants in this general permit process. So Alice's questions regarding whether this was going to apply to development tomorrow, certain parts of it, absolutely yes. The construction site stormwater controls applies immediately to all development. The local grading ordinance will not apply, of course, until the board adopts that, and we will make that effective to all active grading projects, or active applications, I should say. Anybody who's submitting an application after that point will be subject to those requirements. Folks who've got a permit already, it will be hard for us to retro that stuff.
Okay. Thank you. Maria, do you have?
Well, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to send my questions to you or to Jim, both of you, and address them in that way. So I do have several questions, more than several. And the other thing is, I want this to be the county plan. I don't want us going around saying the state made us do it. I mean, the state might have made us do it, but this has to be our plan. And so I would like it to be something that the county's comfortable doing. Whether we were made to or not is immaterial. So I will email my questions to staff.
Okay, you have this draft, and the draft of the grading plan will be available online as well, Rob?
Yes, we'll be posting the draft grading ordinance on the 14th on the county's, your entrance to the county's webpage.
Okay, so that's probably the best place to access this quickly, and I encourage people to take advantage of the 60-day comment period for the stormwater management plan and the 30-day comment period for the grading plan, and get your concerns and questions back as soon as possible so that the opportunity to deal with it before the public hearing. So, Steve, you have a couple things?
Yeah, just a couple. I wanted to check in on the geographic distribution of this. I note the upper McCollum and lower McCollum is not really included, at least in the communities listed. Certainly Paloma has significant washouts every year. We have problems in West Point and a number of other areas that have been well documented. Is the reason they're not in this because the state didn't require us to put them in? And could we voluntarily include projects in those areas that have been chronically flooded with stormwater?
Yes and yes. The reason that we identified these communities was simply because these are the high-growth areas of the county that were identified specifically by the Water Board relative to general permit compliance. We have every opportunity to do what we deem to make sense, and we don't necessarily have to incorporate that as part of our regulatory submittal to the Water Board. But certainly can adopt these policies countywide.
Okay.
Of course, the grading ordinance, the good housekeeping, all of the proposed best management practices are going to be implemented countywide. The only potential aerial geographic limitation, which is something that can be dealt with in the general plan, is for the post-development requirements. So the grading will be enforced equally in all areas of the county.
Okay, I'm interested in places that had some of the older subdivisions that now seem to be having a myriad of problems, having some strategy to address the stormwater issues there countywide, not just in these. That's the specific concern. Secondly, on the grading ordinance, somebody dropped the Tuolumne thing on me a little while ago. I guess they adopted it in June. And we were talking about the tiered systems. I thought it was pretty well written that way, and I'm sure you're taking a look at it, but I hope we'll review that so we don't reinvent the wheel where appropriate. That seemed a lot of it applicable to our circumstances. I haven't had a chance to, I just got this at the opening of this session, but I'm hoping that there's a great deal of attention on having permeable surfacing. There's all kinds of technology that's come in, and we seem to be creating in some of our valleys this kind of flash flood condition as we put impermeable surfaces all over the place, and then sure enough we turn a 100-year floodplain into a 2-year floodplain. And I'm hoping that we can take a look at some of those technologies and put them into suggested solutions for new development so that we don't add to problems we already seem to be experiencing. And I hope we might put some teeth into those. That is, I want to give people choices in how they do things. Some people want to put big ponds and hold water. Other people want to prevent the problem in the first place by putting different kind of surfacing. How we integrate the grading ordinance into a set of construction options is something I'm interested in. So hopefully people take a look at that. And finally, on enforcement, I like the idea of progressive enforcement. We have a tiered system on grading ordinance. Let's take a look at progressively dealing with this on two bases. One is the extent of the violation, and secondly, the repetition of it. We have some people who have just clearly made a decision that paying certain fines is worth the price of doing business and is cheaper than doing it right in the first place. Of course, then we come around to being asked for literally millions of dollars of fix-up in relation to the aftermath of those violations. I'm interested in prevention. I want there to be a sufficient deterrent, especially when we have repeat offenders that do this to an extent that is damaging not just to their own developments, but to the rest of us as well. That's all I have.
Okay, anything further, Rob? Okay, thank you very much. I agree that this is I think it's a very comprehensive document and a heck of a good start. And people have time now to submit their comments. Public hearing is on the 11th, is that correct, September 11th?
Yes.
And by then, hopefully, these concerns will all be addressed and we'll move forward. Thank you very much. Very good report. Thank you too, Jim. Okay, the study session is over with, and we're going to take just a couple of minutes recess so they can gather up their material, and then we're going to discuss junk metal thefts. At this point, we will continue with the study session regards junk metal thefts. Sheriff Downham.
Thank you. We're not going to ask you to take any kind of action today, but we've been working with County Council on an ordinance that hopefully we'll bring forward in the future. And I think what we're looking for today is basically to make sure that the board has an interest in taking a significant look at this, because quite frankly, this county, although we've had 2 or 3 isolated incidents, it certainly hasn't turned into a rampant problem for us like it has other counties. The problem we're looking at, and the reason we think this is important that we bring it forward, Assemblyman Barry Hill introduced legislation that basically mirrors what we're going to ask for in an ordinance, and it implements a lot of reporting requirements by scrap metal dealers. When you have people that don't look like your regular farmers bringing in sections of irrigation pipe and windings out of a motor, out of an irrigation pump, utility lines. Actually, a theft up in El Dorado County put about half a Tahoe out of phone service for almost 3 days up there because they tore out about a mile of trunk line. So this will basically kick in a lot of reporting requirements for scrap metal dealers. Barry Hill introduced this legislation, and who would have ever guessed the scrap metal dealers have a pretty strong lobby, and they basically got it shut down. So because of the impact on the agricultural community, construction community, and utilities, Barry Hill has basically asked all 58 counties to look at introducing their own ordinances if they can't get it on a statewide basis. So we are in the process of drafting an ordinance. We would like to bring it forward in the near future. There is an enforcement element to it, but like most ordinances, it's we can revoke your license. I think it does also have some jail time and up to a $500 fine associated with it.
Can we increase the fine and say no jail time? There's no room at the end.
They'll just steal
more
more metals.
Can I put in the ordinance where the money goes?
Yeah, but you make the fine significant enough.
Well, what we do not have a problem in this county with this at this time. Stanislaus County has just passed their ordinance. It is in place. San Joaquin County is working on them, and quite frankly, we don't want to be sitting here like an island and have some of those folks kind of start business in this county, because we do have wrecking yards, we do have some recycling centers that could make a very easy transition and a little step into some of these metals. So we would very much like to just kind of be preemptive here. And if you want significant details on what we're working with Jim on, Captain Macedo has been working on with County Council.
I think it's a good idea, because if we are this island, even if we don't have a larger significant dismantling or recycling facility for those kind of metals, certainly if we are the only one with no ordinance, somebody will move in and start a business. We're looking for businesses to move to the county. That'd be one.
This is very strongly supported by the Farm Bureau and the State Sheriff's Association.
Is Amador and Tuolumne looking at doing the same?
All 58 sheriffs are looking at doing the same. I have no idea at what step in the process they're in, but I know that all 58 are looking at it.
The draft ordinance that, excuse me, that I was asked to look at was fairly strict, and I think I encouraged the study session to get some board input on that. Because of that sort of philosophy, it requires daily reports of junk sales, 4 hours notification to the sheriff's office of a sale of one of these metals, forbids the use of cash in these transactions. So I thought that it would be good to, if we're going to bring that back to the board, that the board have a chance to provide some input on that. It is strict, and maybe it needs to be strict. I make no comment on that.
Part of what I think this was patterned after was the requirements that are currently in place on pawn shop dealers, quite frankly, where they have to get adequate information, identification from the person. They have to notify law enforcement during a certain time period, that sort of thing.
I mean, every time they buy something, they have to notify law enforcement?
We get pawn slips out of Tuolumne County. If one of our citizens pawns something over there, we will get a copy of that pawn slip over here to compare it against our losses from burglaries and stuff.
So, Dennis, in this ordinance, are the materials identified? I mean, there's a list of, kind of like controlled substances, there's a list of materials, and then is it tiered to, if somebody brings in half a pound of something, as opposed to 100 pounds of something, are there different requirements, or does it start at some point graduated up the list? Or
to answer the first part of your question, yes, the list of materials is described in here in detail. However, there is no weight increment outlined in the ordinance. It is important to note that the idea behind this is that to protect not only the junk dealer or the scrap metal dealer, but it's also to protect the industries previously mentioned by the sheriff. And it's very specific in the types of metals, and it's also it also excludes aluminum can recyclers and people dealing in auto recycling. However, our concern is, as the sheriff mentioned, that some of those facilities can be converted. And when I spoke to members of the Farm Bureau this morning, there is some concern because some of the aluminum can recyclers and some of the auto recyclers do take in some of the scrap metal mentioned in this ordinance and will do it as a side business or in lieu of, and we don't have a real good pulse on how much of that's occurring within the county right now.
Yeah.
I want to see it. I mean, daily reporting. I mean, I think some of the administrative things just are a concern. And I'm not saying I'm not supporting it. I just want to read the details.
Absolutely.
Maybe prior to it coming to the board for an introduction.
Okay.
So at least I could make my comments.
Okay, we just didn't want to keep spinning our wheels on something the board may not have an interest in. I mean, it's certainly at a stage now we can make the requirements for time.
What was the concern about the dealers that Berry Hills legislation came up? What were their concerns?
Well, they don't want the reporting. They don't want to have to get identification shop people, and they want to do cash transactions. So when an investigator shows up and sees 1,000 pounds of
Copper reels.
cable stacked up there, he can go, gee, I don't know where it came from, I just need to get it. And it's, I mean, some of this stuff is just blatantly they're taking stolen property, and they know it, they just don't want to have to admit it.
So it's like being a fence. So,
Yes, exactly.
So how do you deal with a fence on whatever the product is?
That would be where the reporting comes in. The reporting would require to, you would have to identify the source of where the item was collected from, and it would also be able to be used as an investigative tool. There was some real gross negligence that went on with the recyclers, which is what spurred this. One of the close things that hit home was San Joaquin County had several hundred gravestones where the copper was removed, and you had somebody that showed up with several hundred gravestones and, for instance, no story for how they had those. So there was some real gross negligence that I think spurred this, and I know that the Valley has been very supportive of this, and the Central Valley communities with, large amounts of ag crime, they've been very supportive, and some of them have had some of these ordinances in place for a considerable amount of time.
But any dealer that starts buying urns, they're obviously from the cemetery, or brass placards off of cemetery things, and doesn't bother to ask where they came from, how they came into somebody's possession. I mean, they know
The utilities, I guess, are supportive of this. Okay, I just want to see the detail.
Steve?
I would agree. I think I don't want to be overly burdensome on legitimate businesses that are pretty marginal in the first place, and don't want to put people over the edge on reporting requirements. But of course, I don't want people operating as fences either. Maybe this is really coming from a slightly different perspective, a supply and demand problem. I can say that we have almost unlimited amounts of scrap metal in District 2, and if people who are stealing it from other places simply like to help us clean our mess up, we'd be happy to invite them up.
We have intentionally left off scrap auto parts.
All right. Well, that's very helpful.
How about appliances?
Yeah, we get I am wondering about what's on that list, because we've got, we're hauling off a lot of appliances. I'd hate to see that bogged down. There are old corrugated metal and things of that nature that we're finding in great abundance.
The definition they have listed, junk means any and all secondhand and used machinery and all ferrous and non-ferrous scrap metals and alloys, including any and all secondhand and used furniture, pallets, or other personal property other than livestock or portions thereof. Again, this is just definitions. Scrap metals and alloys includes but is not limited to materials and equipment commonly used in construction, agricultural operations and electrical power generation, railroad equipment, oil well rigs, non-ferrous materials, stainless steel, and nickel, which are offered for sale to any junk dealer or recycler, but does not include scrap iron, household generated waste, or aluminum beverage containers as defined in Chapter 2. And there's a specific definition of what recycler means, and household furniture is excluded. Those definitions weren't all inclusive. Some of those were items that were excluded from this ordinance.
Okay, I assume that washing machines, dryers, refrigerators, freezers are all household furniture. Would we consider that?
They are.
Okay.
And,
But
again, the
they
definitions.
can get rid of those for free in this county.
Yeah, that's not good.
Still is your trouble thing.
Right, that's, yeah, our operations are.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of pursuing this, so.
We'll continue working with Jim, and we'll bring it back to you.
Okay.
Can I see it before you bring it back?
Yes, what I'll do is I'll prepare an example ordinance for the board if you'd like, prior to it going.
Can we see it too?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Claudine would like to see it too. Oh, no, they'd each like their own copy.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve, would you call Carol to come back over for this next one? 6371. About a 5-minute break here, folks, and then we will go on to item 19.
Hi, Carol. We're ready.
Regarding resolution authorizing the submittal of an application for funding under the home program for the Calaveras County First Time Home Buyers Program. Admin, Central Sierra Planning Council, and Economic Development District. Morning, Larry.
Good morning. Larry Busby, Central Sierra Planning Council. You have before you an application today to the Home Investment Partnership Program, which is administered by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. Once a year, the eligible counties can apply for housing activities that address the needs of lower-income households. An application has been prepared to continue a program that the county has participated in the last 3 years, which is what's called a first-time home buyer program, which more specifically provides lower-income households who can meet the criteria with down payment assistance in lieu of them having to come up with 20, 30, 40% of the cost of the home. The program provides that back to those borrowers in the form of a deferred loan made by the county to them. So I'll be glad to answer any questions the board or the public may have on the program. And at the conclusion, I would recommend that the board adopt the resolution to submit the application to the state.
So this is similar to if not exactly the same, to the program we've been involved in?
That's correct. It is, in fact, the same program.
Okay.
And it has made a difference in quite a few people's lives.
Yes, it has. The county's been quite successful over the years in promoting the program.
Is this the same amount we've had there? The 800,000, is that?
Yes, that's correct. That was the amount of your last grant as well. Okay. And the reason it's 800,000 is that's the maximum you can apply for.
Okay. Really, yeah.
You've always been very supportive of this.
Okay, Steve.
Same here. So I'd like to, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move to adopt the resolution.
Very well.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a 4-0-2. Thank you for being so patient and waiting.
Thank you.
302.
3-0-2, sorry.
Thanks.
I was going to
Say
get
hi
somebody
to
else to
Melanie.
vote.
You've got the franchise, apparently.
Thank you, Larry. That's it. That's it, Jason. Thank you. Thank you. So,